Long before his beard turned the color of late November frost, Henry Collins believed trees could hold memories. He felt it each time he walked the shadowed corridors of spruce, whose trunks rose like cathedral pillars, catching the green-gold hush of afternoon light. Now, at 77, Hank moved slower, but the forest still breathed around him, whispering familiar names: Balsam, Cedar, Beth. Beth. She had been the melody in his life's anthem, a fellow ranger who could name mosses the way some people recited hymns. She died 5 winters ago, cancer stealing her quicker than a burst wildfire. Since then, the cabin felt larger, colder, yet Hank stayed. To leave would be to betray the land they'd saved together from clear-cut petitions and reckless ATV trails. Autumn arrived early that year. On the first morning of October, a crust of white dusted the blueberry barrens and turned spiderwebs into necklaces of glass beads. Hank tugged on his wool cap, grabbed his mahogany walking stick, and checked the temperature. 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Too early for this much cold, he muttered. But climate never asked permission anymore. He needed to survey the northern trap line, a remnant route from bygone times when he confiscated illegal snares. The state cut budgets, no one replaced him. Old habits die hard, so Hank kept walking, checking, reporting snares to the warden service. On that crisp morning, sun just grazing the tips of black spruces, he found more than he bargained for. But I don't know. The snare. It was the smell that stopped him first. A coppery tang mixed with spruce pitch. Following the scent down a slope carpeted in club moss, he saw a flash of silver gray against snow. Movement, weak but unmistakable. There, tangled in a wire noose, lay a juvenile Canada lynx. Its ruff was matted with blood, where the cable had tightened around a hind leg. Tufted ears, usually arrogant and upright, drooped like wilted flags. Golden eyes dulled by pain studied Hank but did not flinch. Snares were illegal for lynx, a threatened species in Maine, yet poachers still set them, hoping for valuable pelts. Hank's breath caught as an old ache radiated through his sternum, not fear but premonition. He lowered himself gingerly, speaking in the low timbre that once soothed orphaned black bear cubs. Easy, little hunter, I'm not here to hurt you. The cat's lips peeled back over small carnivore fangs. It tried to jerk away, but the wire bit deeper. Hank slid his Leatherman free, fingers stiff with arthritis, yet precise. 10 minutes later, the snare sprang open, metal whining like a wounded fiddle string. The lynx collapsed on its side, chest heaving. He could call the warden service, wait an hour for them to arrive from Fort Kent, but hypothermia would kill the cat long before. The ranger in him warred with the realist. Law said leave wildlife wild. Compassion said carry it home. Compassion won. Hank wrapped the lynx in his wool jacket, feeling the tremor of every labored breath. Snowflakes the size of moth wings drifted down as he lifted the bundle and began the 2-mile trek back to Lantern Lake cabin. Echo. The cabin crouched beside a kettle pond whose surface mirrored the pewter sky. Hank laid the lynx on an old quilt by the hearth, stoked birch logs until orange flames licked high. The cat's paws were comically large, snowshoes designed by evolution for silent travel atop powder. Its tail, shorter than a house cat's, flicked weakly as Hank cleaned the wound with warm saline. He whispered stories while he worked, of Beth's first field class, of the time a bull moose thundered through their garden like a runaway freight. Perhaps he spoke more for himself than for the cat, but the lynx listened, eyes half closed, as though cataloging sound for future reference. Night thickened outside, wind rattled frosted window panes. Just after midnight, the lynx stirred, opened its teeth, and released a sound that shivered Hank's spine, an eerie, hollow yowl that reverberated in the rafters. It reminded him of voices calling across frozen lakes. An echo. That's what I'll call you, he said softly. Echo. The cat's ears twitched. Naming wildness was a dangerous intimacy, but the deed was done. Hank, pragmatist though he was, felt a thin thread attach itself between 2 wounded hearts. One human, one feline, each echoing the other's loneliness. Days of ice and quiet. Echo refused prepared venison, but accepted snowshoe hare. Hank harvested with clean headshots. The cat ate slowly, using incisors to strip meat, while amber eyes never left Hank's silhouette. On day 4, Echo limped to the hearth by choice. On day 9, the Lynx allowed Hank to run a weathered hand along its ruff, tracing the gradient from slate to silver. Hank kept notes like any good scientist. Day 11, Echo begins nocturnal patrol inside cabin, circling perimeter 3 times between dusk and dawn, likely instinctive territorial mapping. Day 13, first play behavior, batting at dangling bootlace. Day 17, successful test of leg strength, can jump onto window bench, 3 feet. Between entries, Hank drifted into memories. Beth reading Thoreau aloud, Claire fishing off the dock, the smell of cedar-smoked trout that seeped into pine floorboards. The cabin became a museum of recollection, with a living Lynx as both exhibit and guardian. One late afternoon, Echo sat beside Hank on the porch, each watching crimson sunlight ignite tamarack needles. Without warning, the Lynx pressed its forehead to Hank's knee, a silent benediction, and Hank's throat tightened until words would not pass. In that lean burst of affection, he felt something unscar. Possibility. Yet wildness has its own contract. Echo grew restless as November snow deepened. At dawn, Hank often found paw prints tattooed across the entry rug, evidence of pacing. The cat would sit by the door, nostrils flaring at distant scents, hares, voles, maybe rival lynx drifting on cold thermals. Hank knew letting Echo go would reopen the wound he'd just begun to stitch. But cages, even well-meaning ones, crush wild souls. Still, he hesitated. Winter in the North Woods is no gentle tutor. A half-healed leg could doom Echo to death by starvation or wolf pack. He decided to give it until first week of December. Then, poachers return. Hank's prediction of December storms rang true. Freezing rain sheathed branches and armor that shattered under its own weight, echoing gunshots through the valley. One sleet-flecked morning, Hank followed a ribbon of smoke and found tire tracks carved into the snow along the old tote road. Someone had built a blind near the far ridge. From behind a tamarack, he watched 2 men in blaze-orange gear speaking in hushed tones, peering through binoculars at the corridor where Lynx chased snowshoe hares. They moved with the casual arrogance of repeat offenders, rifles slung low, unaware of the game camera Hank installed last summer. He kept silent, but a hot pulse hammered behind his ribs. Echo was no longer just a creature of scientific interest. Echo was family. The realization startled him like a slap of cold water. That night, Hank downloaded camera footage, the men setting fresh snares, one of them joking that lynx pelts fetched good money in private markets down in Boston. Hank forwarded images to the warden service, but roads had become near impassable. Help might arrive in days or never. He stoked the stove, pulled Beth's old 30-30 from the cabinet, and oiled the lever action with deliberate care. Echo padded closer, pupils wide, reading tension in Hank's muscles. The Lynx loosed a low chuff, half purr, half question, but Hank only murmured, "Not tonight, friend. Let's hope it doesn't come to this." The blizzard and the breaking heart. On December 23rd, the storm barreled in from the Gulf of Alaska, swallowing the Appalachians in a white maw. Hank chopped kindling outside when pain, sharp as a felling wedge, split his chest. Axe slipped, embedding in ice. Hank staggered, breath whistling shallow, world tilting until only ragged snowflakes clung to focus. He collapsed beside the chopping block. Inside the cabin, Echo lifted its head, ears pivoting like satellite dishes. The Lynx bounded to the window, tail twitching. It rose on hind legs, pawed frost-rimmed glass, then dropped, spine arched. An ancestral algorithm fired. Protect territory? No. Protect pack. Echo bolted through the cat door Hank had cut weeks earlier. The blizzard slapped fur flat to body, but Echo pushed on, nose testing wind. 50 yards away, the Lynx found Hank sprawled, face gray as December sky. Steam curled weakly from his open mouth. Echo circled once, then did something Hank would later struggle to believe. It bit down on his parka collar and tugged with rhythmic jerks, dragging fabric toward the cabin. But Hank's weight was immovable. The Lynx paused, panting, then bounded inside. 10 frantic minutes later, Echo re-emerged with Hank's neon orange windbreaker clenched in jaws. The cat dropped it over Hank like a blanket, then turned upslope toward the distant logging road. Muscles bunched, paws punched through drifts, and Echo vanished into the squall. Against traffic. He braked hard, tires skidding on black ice. The shape stopped in the twin beams, a big cat, tufted ears rimed with snow, eyes an amber lantern. Bruce reached for his radio but froze when the Lynx turned, looked straight at him, then trotted away from the road, pausing to stare back. It repeated the pattern, move, stare, move, like a living Morse code. Curiosity overrode caution. Bruce followed at a crawl until the cat slipped into a fire road only snowmobiles used. 30 yards in, Bruce found a man half buried by snowfall, an orange jacket marking him as though Providence had wielded a brush. His pulse was faint. Bruce radioed EMS. Half an hour later, paramedics bundled Hank onto a stretcher. No one saw the Lynx again that morning. Tracks led deeper into the forest, vanishing where gusts swept them clean. White walls, old wounds. Hospital corridors smelled of bleach and quiet dread. Hank surfaced from anesthesia to Claire's worried face. Her eyes, Beth's eyes, filled with anger and relief in equal measure. "Dad, you almost died alone in that cabin." "Wasn't alone," he rasped, voice gravel on stone. He tried to explain about Echo, but morphine fuzzed memory. The story came out like half-remembered dream. A cat, too much snow, a road of light. Doctors spoke language of stents, beta blockers, assisted living facilities. Hank listened politely, then fixed Claire with steady resolve. "I built that cabin with my own hands. I plan to die there, but not yet." Claire clenched fists, then unclenched. "Some storms you cannot plow through, you navigate around." They agreed on compromises: solar panels to cut wood chopping labor, a satellite phone, monthly supply runs. Claire's husband Mike would rig railings along the porch come spring. Hank would carry a nitro spray at all times. None of it addressed the heartbeat of the woods he missed with every cell. The soft-footed miracle. In late March, Hank returned home. Snow still blanketed balsam shadows, but sap buckets already clung to maples, promising sweet months ahead. Each day he checked tracks, hoping for a print with 2 lobes up front and 1 behind. A Lynx's calling card. April 19th, dawn dripped pink across Lantern Lake. Hank opened the door to cool mud season air. At the tree line stood Echo, fur healthy, leg muscle fully restored. Beside her tumbled 3 kittens, ears tufted like tiny paintbrushes. Echo did not approach, nor did Hank move forward. They were partners in a story that had reached its turning page. The Lynx held his gaze, an entire language in gold irises, then turned, shepherding kits into shadows. The forest swallowed them the way a sand dune swallows footprints, gently, completely. Hank exhaled a wordless blessing that condensed into fog and drifted away. Epilogue, tracks of memory. 8 years later, Claire stood in her father's cabin, sorting notebooks stacked in uneven towers. Hank had passed quietly in his sleep, pen in hand, journals filled to the last margin. She traced his final entry. "Snow falling tonight, big as goose feathers." Heard a distant yowl, could be Echo or one of her daughters. Amazing how a forest keeps promises if you learn to listen. Claire stepped into the porch, tears cutting warm channels down windburned cheeks. Fresh powder lay unbroken, except for 1 set of prints, round, oversized, ending at the spot where Hank's rocker faced the lake. They lingered a moment longer in morning light, then gusts from the northwest erased them, gifting Hank's secret back to the pines. And somewhere beyond the timberline, a wild echo answered, carrying his name into eternity.